Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am welcoming Kim Stanley Robinson to Barcelona for the first time, to Catalonia for the first time in his life, to the Iberian Peninsula for the first time in his life.
Right.
Now.
This is a new story to tell that I think is important to talk about. It was Tsiolkovsky, the Russian rocket scientist and philosopher, 150 years ago almost, said, Earth is humanity's cradle. You're not meant to stay in your cradle forever. And the image would be that humanity was somehow transcendent and separate from the rest of Earth's biophysical systems, and could then go to the stars. And there's a idea in our culture, pretty widespread, especially amongst the space cadets that I tend to associate with, and that includes now the internet and tech community centered in Silicon Valley that is pretty powerful worldwide, that humanity's success or its future was inevitably going to be colonizing the stars and going out through the galaxy. It was an idea from 1890, or maybe it's an ancient Greek idea, who can tell, but it turns out that it's probably wrong, badly wrong, because the stars are too far away, and this is a story that science fiction hasn't been telling. It wants to go out there, and as a fiction it says, well, we've got faster than light travel, or even if we don't have faster than light travel, we have multi-generational starships. We live for generations inside a starship, get to new planets that are amazingly hospitable to humanity, and then we live there, and then we bounce on through the galaxy. And this has almost been seen as inevitable or a sign of humanity's success, that if we don't do that, that we've somehow failed as a species, and in some transcendent or religious sense, we haven't reached or fulfilled our destiny. But if the idea is wrong to begin with, then we're judging humanity's progress, and we're focusing on what humanity can do and should do in the wrong place, and tending to have what you might call the moral hazard of assuming that if we happen to destroy Earth, we might always have other humans on other planets in the galaxy. If it's a wrong idea, physically impossible, then you can dispense with it and say, although the universe is beautiful to look at night, and through radio telescopes, et cetera, it's still a place we can never get to, that our neighborhood, the solar system, is our permanent and only home, and in that neighborhood, only the Earth is capable of supporting human life because we co-evolved with it. We are expressions of Earth, and we are integrated really closely, like the other organs of our body, with the rest of the biosphere here, including its bacteria. So one of the things that convinced me to write this book was the finding that 50% of the DNA inside your body is not human DNA. This is a relatively new finding, and it's kind of shocking to think that you are a forest, you are a biome, and the other species inside you that cooperate with you help you to digest your food, help you to process your air and to create your bones. You're a cooperative. If you get into a starship and you have nothing but other human beings and a very limited amount of supplies, as things cycle through their ecological cycles, through the generations and years and decades, there will be metabolic rifts where things like phosphorus get stuck along the way and bond to the metal in the starship. And even if only 0.1% gets stuck every time it cycles through, that will be enough of a blockage that as the decades pass, the interior of the starship will get sick. The bacteria in our bodies will evolve at different rates, usually faster, than you yourself will evolve, because we don't evolve very fast. We have the same DNA that humans who came to Spain more than 100,000 years ago had. The only difference is lactose tolerance, which came into human beings about 17,000 years ago. So we don't evolve very fast as a DNA, but bacteria do evolve very fast. And in the differential, what you're going to get is illness and eventually death. by way of deprivation or poisoning of one substance or another, probably several. So this was a new story to tell. We can't go to the stars. The nearest star, which I chose Tau Ceti because it has a great science fiction tradition, Isaac Asimov, Ursula Le Guin, they always going to Tau Ceti. It's 12 light years away, and it has 2 Earth-like planets in the habitable zone, the Goldilocks zone of liquid water, and it's a star that isn't grotesquely different from our star in terms of its heat and its metallicity. Well, 12 light years away is 10 billion times further away than the moon. And in that quantitative change, you get a qualitative change. It goes from being something humans can do to something that humans that can't do, and yet Tau Ceti is remarkably close compared to almost all the rest of the stars. Alpha Centauri is closer at 4 light years, but many of the stars that we see at night are hundreds to thousands of light years away. And so the human mind, incapable of comprehending that, but if you make some graphs, there's a very beautiful program on a computer where you're shown Earth, and then it's scrolling to the side, and eventually you get Mars, like a minute later, and then about 5 minutes later you get Jupiter, and about an hour and a half passes before Pluto shows up, and then you would have to wait several weeks at that speed before the nearest star would show up. So there are ways in which we can try to convince ourselves, but it somewhat boggles the mind to comprehend how big the universe actually is. And if you do the mental work to work it out, then you suddenly think more than ever, Earth, humanity, never going to be parted. This is our own one and only home. And that's a new story to tell that I think science fiction has to tell.
Yes.
We are going to be discussing geoengineering for the next couple hundred years. Various mitigations, because it will be dangerous if we pass a certain number of tipping points in the alteration of the Earth's atmosphere. And we're very close to those tipping points. We can burn about 500 more gigatons of carbon before we will have pushed the temperature past the 2 degrees average temperature per year for the globe that will begin to perhaps tip us over into other reactions of the Earth that will heat it up even more in an accelerating greenhouse effect, having to do with the release of the methane that's frozen in the poles, other CO2 sources. We're getting to a dangerous point, and that 500 gigatons that we can still burn at the rate that we're burning it now, we will have burned it by the year 2040. If we burn less carbon, we can give ourselves more time. You have to also point out that there is, humanity has already identified 2,500 gigatons at least of fossil carbon in the ground. And there are companies that claim that 2,500 gigatons as monetary assets and have already borrowed money using that as an asset. There are nation states, including the United States, that claim that fossil carbon as a national asset that increases the security and the wealth of that particular nation. Canada, Russia, Australia, the United States, they all have fossil carbon in huge amounts that they would all like to burn so that their 500 out of the 2,500 is burned and everybody else would perhaps not burn theirs in an imaginative exercise that will never come true. This is the situation that we're in. So then there will be scientists that say, well, if we put a number of tons of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere, it will be like an artificial volcanic explosion. This is the most plausible geoengineering. It will reflect sunlight, the Earth will cool. We've seen this with the volcanic explosions. And it will go away in about 5 years. So this is relatively safe relative to other problems. Also, with sea level rise, I'm already seeing suggestions that I thought were my crazy ideas, but now they're being studied by scientific institutes of quite serious scientists. Could you pump water onto the Antarctic cap and freeze it up there? Could you pump water into the dry basins of Asia fast enough to mean that sea level rise wouldn't rise like it would if you just let it go? Well, this is geoengineering, and about 20% of the electricity that all of humanity generates would be needed to pump that much water onto the Antarctic ice cap. We might do it. We don't know. The coastlines of the world are worth so much money that I just gave up on estimating it. But the insurance companies and the reinsurance companies, they don't give up on it. They tell us, we can't afford to pay for this. Nobody can insure for this. The coastlines of the world they're priceless as well as invaluable. So geoengineering is going to come up over and over again. And the salting of the Gulf Stream may stall if there's too much fresh water that melts off of Greenland. And if the Gulf Stream stalls, then a petawatt of heat, which is, I can just say, lots of heat, okay? A petawatt is, I'm an English major and it boggles my mind, but it's so much that Europe is perhaps 10 degrees warmer than it would otherwise be without the Gulf Stream. And Europe feeds itself. In other words, it grows the food that feeds the 450 million people that live here. If the Gulf Stream goes away, Europe has a climate like northwestern Canada. And so you need the Gulf Stream. So in my novel, they tried to re-stimulate it. It's a particularly crazy plan and not likely to work, but people will be trying desperate things in order to geo-finesse the situation as it gets worse and worse. There will be moral arguments. Is this a sane thing to do? No. Is it right? What about the secondary effects? What about the unintended consequences of doing something radical to the Earth itself? Which, for instance, like running millions of cars and poisoning the atmosphere, which we've already done. We know things can go wrong by accident. So it becomes really a vexed topic, and it would be better to slow down the pollution of the atmosphere and to avoid climate change in the first place. So the more we discuss it, the more we contemplate the difficulties, the better and quicker the response can be for us.
Yeah.
And here, I want to explain what I think science fiction is doing. It's like the glasses that you put on when you go into a 3D movie. It has two different lenses doing two different things to make a third thing. Through one lens, you're seeing somebody trying to predict the future. So they're like a prophet in the Old Testament. They're like Jeremiah. If we keep doing this, we're going to get here. It really is an attempt at prediction. The other lens is a metaphor for right now. Oh my God, there are zombies everywhere. They're trying to kill me. Well, this is, The Walking Dead is the people, you have the precariat. You have no assurance of a pension. You have no assurance of health care. You don't have any assurance of a job. Of course you're a zombie. So this is how it feels. So between true prediction and metaphor for right now, a third thing pops, and that's time, that's history, that's our moment, and that's what science fiction can do that ordinary literature, with the divorce of the week, the scandal of the day, by focusing only on relationships of individual to individual or even individual to society, what they miss is the relationship of the individual to the planet and to history. So I make the claim for science fiction as the most powerful literature of our time, and I'm ready to argue the point with anybody, as I think it's true.
Mm-hmm. Clap, clap, clap. Yeah.
Pointing out that I find very interesting is we've hit the limits of the planet. Each one of the great expansions of capitalism, which goes Genoa, and then the Netherlands, and then Britain, and then America, has been taking over more and more of the planet's raw materials, human and natural, but we've maxed out. And the Chinese, who you might imagine being the next, Giovanni Arrighi, before he died, was imagining that the next big expansion would come from China. The planet's maxed out. China's in trouble. They can't do what America and what Britain and what Holland did. And so we're at a point where we have to change the system itself to some kind of stable, sustainable in the true sense of being able to run it century after century in a finite planet that is our only possible home. So there's partly, the Silicon Valley would say, well, the next space is the moon, is the solar system. There's nothing out there that will be serviceable to us in the same way. It's iron, it's water, it's aluminum, it's silica. We've got all of that in huge abundance here. We'll never run out of it. So the next space of expansion is not a real space of expansion. It's a fantasy. So this is a problem. This is, I think, the reason we talk about the Anthropocene, that we're in a new geological age, is that we're in a new political economy age. We're in a new, it's physical, but it's also, more importantly, economic. We've hit a new era, and we're going to have to deal.